Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the October meeting of the Princeton Community Democratic Organization. I'm delighted that you've joined us this evening. Here we are 16 days out from the election, and I hope we can gather for a few minutes and calm our nerves and leave inspired to give it all we've got for the next couple of weeks. I'd like to begin our meeting tonight with a moment of silence in remembrance of Marvin Reed, who served as the mayor of the former borough of Princeton. Anyone who served on council or on the planning board in the last 30 years knew Marvin as a dedicated public servant and a wise and generous mentor and truly a kind man. So if we could take a moment of silence. Thank you. I want to begin our meeting with our county clerk, Paula Sollami Cavallo. Welcome. For those of you who have voted so far, you know that Paula's on the ballot. And for those of you who can't, excuse me, haven't voted, don't overlook her name on the ballot. This is a year that wasn't really on anyone's bingo card in terms of this election, but I feel quite proud of the way our state and county have responded to that, and that we do have vote by mail in our entire state. I wonder if, Paula, you want to give us a little bit of an update on how things are going?
Sure. Thank you so much, Joe, and good evening to everyone. And I too want to say that I will miss Marvin Reed very much. I worked with him closely on the governor's conference when it was in Princeton in 1992. I was just a young employee at the governor's office. And I will tell you that he was a wonderful man to work with, just so kind and generous and very smart. And I will miss him.
Thank you.
I wanted, and I send my sympathies to Ingrid. I don't know if she's on the call. I also wanted to just speak a little about the election and let you know where we are. I have a little slideshow, and I can share my screen, which will show basically the outline of what is required for this election. Now, I know everybody is pretty well familiar with it at this point because you've received your vote by mail ballots, but I still will go through it, and then from there we can discuss where we are now, and I can take questions as well if you would like. So let me see if I can just pull this up.
Joe, just while Paula's doing that, do you want to remind people how they can submit questions?
Oh, that's great. Yes, at forum@princetondems.org, right? Yeah, forum@princetondems.org. Thank you.
This works. And if it does not work, then there we go. Okay. So this is my screen. This is the, I had a voter information session on October 3rd. And what we can tell you is obviously this all began when Governor Murphy issued an executive order and then a follow-up executive order, number 177 and 179, stating that every registered voter will receive a vote by mail ballot in anticipation of the election. But he also allowed for a limited number of polling places to remain open for voters who prefer to vote on a provisional ballot. Now, please note that provisional ballot is a paper ballot. So if you do choose to go to the polls, you will be voting on a paper ballot. And there will be limited access for those who have disabilities so that those individuals can go and vote on a voting machine at the polls. So while I'm on this, I'll let you know that postcards are going to be mailed out in the next week, probably about Tuesday of this week. And you'll receive a postcard in the mail in lieu of a sample ballot. And that was also under Executive Order 177. And when you receive that postcard in the mail, it will tell you your polling location, which will possibly be different than the one you normally vote at. The reason for that is we have less polling locations this election, and that is all tied to the fact that we probably will have less poll workers available due to COVID-19. So take a careful look at that polling location that's located up on the outside of your sample postcard. Also on the sample postcard that's coming to you, you will have the drop box locations for Mercer County. So if you haven't dropped your ballot off yet, you can take a look at that polling location. You will find out where you will be voting. This is the three offices that run the elections. And I did want to point this out to everybody because I think that there's a lot of confusion about what offices are responsible for which election functions. There are 3 different offices in Mercer County that run elections. The Mercer County Clerk's office, which is my office, receives petitions for all offices of municipal clerks, and except for those filed with the Attorney General. I design and print all election ballots. I draw the ballot position. I print and furnish the vote by mail ballots, emergency ballots, and provisional ballots. I also approve or reject vote by mail applications, and I prepare a list of vote by mail ballot applications. What I don't have listed here as well is that I also post the results on election night, and I certify the results of the election at the end, after the Board of Election is counted. Then there is also the Mercer County Board of Elections. Now, a lot of the questions that people have usually are directed to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections selects the polling locations. They also obviously have to make sure those are handicap accessible polling locations. They maintain the districts. They're the ones that are choosing the polling locations for the upcoming election. They appoint the challengers. They appoint and train the board workers, and they're holding trainings at the present time for board workers through Zoom and in person. And they receive and count and investigate and certify vote by mail ballots. They also count, certify provisional ballots, and they also count at the end, and they submit to me the final count of paper ballots, which I then combine with the machine totals. And that's how we arrive at the final numbers that we certify and submit to the state. And then the third, there's a third, and not everybody has a third. Some counties don't, but our county has a superintendent of elections office as well. Some offices, some counties only have the board handle registration, but in our county, the superintendent of elections office handles registration of voters. So that office would be the one where you need to change your address, register to vote, and make sure that, you know, if someone passes away, you notify the superintendent of elections so they can update their voter rolls. And that is currently Kathy DiCostanzo, as superintendent, and the deputy is Nate Walker. Lastly, they also are the custodian of the voting machines. So that would be the office that buys the voting machines, and that's the office that stores the voting machines and programs the voting machines. And then as I hear, there are the 4 ways you can return your mail-in ballot. As you might not know, it has to be postmarked by election day. So if you have a vote by mail ballot and you want to submit it, make sure it's postmarked by election day. If it's not, ask them to stamp it in front of you, because if it gets in late and it's not postmarked by election day, it may not count. It will be, if it's postmarked by election day, it has 7 days to be submitted to the Board of Elections to count. You drop it off at your polling place on election day. That's new. You never were able to do that before, but as of with this election, the governor has allowed it, so you can bring it right to the polls, and you can bring it to a drop box in the polling location, and you can sign, and it'll be submitted. Another option you have is to drop it off at the Board of Elections at 1440 Parkside Avenue in Ewing, and that's a new location. They used to be in Trenton, but they are now in Ewing at the old Youth Detention Center for the county. And you can bring it there if you feel comfortable about doing that, and hand it in person. And then your last choice is to drop it off at one of the 16 drop boxes throughout the county. They have one now at the Board of Elections office as well. So there are now 16 drop boxes in Mercer County. One is in Princeton, of course, at the municipal building. And then there's one here in Lawrence. I'm in Lawrence, over at the municipal building as well. And they are in most municipalities in Mercer County. The drop boxes are open, and they are collecting from between 1,500 and 2,000 ballots per day at the current time. And they're monitored with cameras, and they on election day at 8 p.m. sharp, they're going to be closed. So I wanted to let you know that. And then these are the important deadlines. Obviously, some of them have passed, but the 28th of October is a Wednesday, and my office will have extended hours so people can walk in and pick up a ballot or pick up an envelope if they are missing an envelope, or if they need a replacement ballot. They can come in any business day, but these are extended hours until 7:30 p.m. on the 28th. And also the morning of Halloween, we're going to be open from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. For the same reason, so people can walk in and pick up a ballot or pick up an envelope or they have to sign an affidavit if you lost a ballot and you need to replace it. You can do that at our office that day or any other business day. And then, of course, November 3rd is election day, and the polls are open from 6 to 8 p.m. And at that time, drop boxes will close at 8 p.m. and so will polls. So everything ends then, and then we start the counting. And lastly, the Track My Ballot app is something that isn't now. This is something, if you want to make sure that your ballot was received by the Board of Elections, and then you can see if it was counted, you can take advantage of this new app that is on the State Division of Elections website, and it is now working. I know many people are aware of the fact that the Board of Elections was not counting or was not logging them in because they had more than one case of COVID. And because there was the situation, they were able to reassign other county workers to the Board of Elections office to start logging them in, scanning them in, and putting and so that people can see that their vote was received or their ballot was received. So you will start to see it this week, which is great news. And I have to say, I have to give a lot of credit to Brian Hughes and the administration, because when they saw that the board was down, and I notified them, and so did the other election offices, that people were very concerned, they reassigned staff and they got it moving. So I have to thank him for that, because it is now moving along and you will be able to track your ballot this week. Now, if your ballot still doesn't show that it was received, what can you do? You can call up my office and we can issue you a new ballot if you didn't submit it, or you can vote by a provisional paper ballot on election day. Your vote's only going to count once. So either it's going to count by mail or it's going to count by provisional, but they will not count your ballots, two ballots for you. So if you are concerned about that, you can go to the polls and vote on a provisional. So that's it for my little presentation. I can, let me stop.
Thank you, Paula. I feel like you made that presentation particularly for me, because I know I've been peppering you with questions and you keep saying, not me, elections, that's the elections. But thank you.
Joe. It's not just you, it's so many people. That's why I did it. I said, hopefully it'll alleviate some confusion, but I'm always happy to answer any question I can, as you know, and I'm sure all the other offices will as well, if it's something for my office.
Well, you're very kind. I do have a question about something you said in the presentation. You said that they would start to count ballots on the evening of the 3rd at 8 o'clock. I was under the impression that we had changed so that we can start counting ballots early. Is that up to 10 days?
Right. Yeah,
so we're going to start counting New Jersey.
Yes, yeah. But the ballots that they're receiving on election day, yes, they will obviously start counting after. But they are going to start counting 10 days before the election, correct, which is like this coming week.
So you probably can't say this, but I think maybe in my position, I can go out on a limb and say to residents, voters, that if you got your ballot in earlier than election day, that is beneficial for us, for the state. We can get it counted. The sooner New Jersey can report the results. I think particularly if you're a Democrat, we want to be in that position of reporting the results early and being clearly in the Biden camp.
Yes.
I said that, not you.
I was like, I can see that. I want a Democratic club meeting. Yes.
Yes. Heather, do you have any questions, or we
do? A question about the tracking, and I'm so glad you, Paul, that you explained about the tracking, because I think a couple of days ago people were worried that they were seeing, I mailed it in a while ago and I haven't. And actually, I just checked and mine was received. So I think they must be up in, which is really exciting. Now, was that the last word, received? Are we going to know anything about it's been opened and counted, or it's just going to say received?
You will know if it was counted. At the end, you will see that. Yes. And if it's not counted, then you will also find that out. And then remember, they're going to give opportunities for people to cure. If it wasn't counted, if they'll notify you and you can cure your signature within a specified time, or if there's some other type of cure that can be accomplished, they will allow it. But
well, can you say more about that? How will they, I think, because that's a really important point. There's been reports about being a higher rate of rejection of mail-in ballots. on signature matches. So if there's a problem, how will they'll contact us by what? They'll call us?
They're
or
supposed
how-
to reach
whatever?
out to you by phone or email. So they have to try
Okay.
multiple different ways to reach you, and you will get, or a letter, and you will have, I believe, 48 hours to cure that ballot and return it back so that it can be counted.
So cure meaning to fix it, to do it again
Yeah.
if there's a
Yes.
problem. Got it. So that's great. So people can monitor online, it's up and running, but if there's a problem,
Yes.
you'll be notified.
Answer your landline.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate. And Heather, you're kind of monitoring questions. You haven't seen anything come in. I think, Paula, that was really, you covered the questions I sort of prepared in advance. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your being with us, and best of luck in your own election.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to be here with everyone.
Appreciate it. I apologize, Heather, I didn't introduce you as PCDO Vice President and our former council colleague. I also want to pull in Dina Shaw at this time, who is our program chair for the PCDO, and welcome our mayoral candidate, Mark Freda. Yay, is everybody on? Great. Dina is going to help us have our conversation with Mark. I think I can go out on a limb since you're running unopposed and refer to you as Princeton's future mayor. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, people who would like to submit questions, forum@princetondems.org. And Dina, would you like to kick off the conversation?
Absolutely. Can you hear me pretty well?
Yep.
Good.
Perfect.
Great. Hi, Mark. I can't see you on my screen, but I know you're out there. So the first question that Joe and some others of us put together, Joe Butler, is to ask you about your vision as you will be our new mayor. How do you see the town coming out of the recession? And in particular, what do you anticipate for the central business district?
Sure. Thanks for the question. And before I start, let me just say thank you to the PCDO. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Bill, for the work, and whoever else helped put this together. And thanks to everybody that's actually out there watching this. But anyway, on the central business district going forward. So the elected officials this year, next year, going forward, we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to both our capital and operating budgets. And I say that because coming out of COVID-19, there's going to be impacts on our ability to spend money and our ability to raise money. But for the central business district overall, I think what the town was able to accomplish for the restaurants with outdoor dining, that kind of flexibility and being nimble enough to see that there's something that needs to be done and acting exceedingly quickly for a governmental entity, that is something that's a skill that we now need to hold on to and be able to do, because we don't know exactly what challenges are going to continue to come up for all the business districts, whether it's the CBD or the extended business districts down Nassau Street, the shopping center, whatever. But I think, we're going to have to pay a lot of attention working with the merchants. The downtown needs to be cleaner. So anyway, we need to pay more attention to our downtown. We want it to be appealing to visitors. We want them to come and shop here. We want them to come in and eat here. We want them to spend time in our town. Numerous businesses have said to me over and over that many of their customers come from out of town. So we need to be aware of that. And we need to be aware of that. So as we make decisions on what we're going to do for the business districts, we can't have too narrow a focus. There's parking challenges. People don't believe it, but there are. And especially if you understand that many business customers are coming from out of town, they can't just ride their bicycle here or walk here, as many of us that live in town can. So anyway, there's a lot of balancing that has to happen here. I think another thing that the town can do directly to help merchants and different businesses in town is if you want to sell a service or items to the town, you have to get on a list. There's paperwork to go through and everything. Well, I think, every year the town should reach out to the businesses. Do you want to be a vendor for the town? We'll have somebody actually help you get through all that paperwork. So for some number of businesses, that's probably a plus. And, we should shop local. We, the government, should shop local, just as we tell all our residents, shop local. And I really think that our residents have to understand that shopping local is in their own best interest. What happens, the success of our businesses and merchants downtown affects all of us. The commercial ratables in town are about 17% of our total rateable base. So I'm sorry, the commercial ratables throughout the town, not just the downtown, are about 17% of our rateable base. So that's about $1.2 billion of value out of a total rateable base of about 7.2 billion of value. So you want to support those businesses. You want those taxes to keep to come in. You want those ratables to be assessed at a fair number, but as high as possible, as high as reasonably possible. So all of this goes into the mix when trying to figure out how to handle what's going on with our business districts. Anyway, so I hope that's enough on that one.
That is, and then, you know, to add on to that, we have 500 plus new homes, I'll call them homes, residences, coming to our shopping center area over the next 5 years. Would you like to comment just on how you see that being a plus, or how that evolves in terms of the economics of the shopping center?
Sure. I see that as a mixed bag. I'm not a fan at all of the design for that development. I understand why it came about, but that doesn't mean I have to like the design. The density there from that development, though, should help the shopping center. There's a lot of vacancies at the shopping center right now. I don't know that, from being an outsider looking into the shopping center, that I necessarily agree with some of the decisions that have been made as far as the rents there and some of the businesses that have been forced to leave. Doesn't quite make sense to me, but I'm hoping there's some business plan there that works. And maybe that business plan needs to be amended going forward. I would hope that as we start our master plan process, updating our master plan process next year, that we take a long, serious look at the shopping center and try to put a very coordinated effort into what is the long-term program for the shopping center. And we need to pay attention to that. You know, it's still pretty much the same shopping center that was built in the 1960s. It hasn't changed. I know that people question, geez, instead of this development that's this big box that sits out in the middle of the parking lot, why don't we build above existing stores and things like that? You know, the place wasn't built, it's not structurally strong enough, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but you know, let's take a long-term view. Let's work with the owners of the shopping center. It's in their best interest for us to have a plan that helps them mix in with all the residential properties around them, helps them become more of a magnet to draw people to Princeton, to draw area residents to shop there. So again, there's a lot to be done there, but there's a lot of potential with the shopping center.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, let's move on to a budget question, because I know that people sitting out there might have an interest in their residential taxes. This week, the council approved additional hiring of a new position. And due to COVID, we sort of expect a decline in many sources of revenue for our town, meaning tax receipts could be down. How do you see the outlook for residential property taxes?
Right. So as with so many things, I really want to push next year a big picture view on anything we talk about, anything we hope to decide. And I'll try to get into a whole bunch of things that I think are into the mix when it comes to the budget. So any position that becomes vacant, or any position that we want to create, let's just say vacant positions, somebody retires, somebody takes a job somewhere else. We should look at each of those positions. And first of all, let's make sure we don't already have a resource that's hired that could handle that, whatever that need is. The other thing is, a position opens up, is the best need or the best use of that position what it was before? Or do we have a greater need somewhere else and that position should be used for that, or part of that position should be used for that? I'm not a fan of a position open, we should automatically fill it. We need to review every position. And I think going forward, at least for the next year, that we need to literally, the council needs to be aware of every position that opens and what are we going to do with it? So right now, our parking revenues so far this year are down $2 million. State aid, I believe the state keeps saying, don't worry about it. Your $2.5 million of state aid you get approximately will still show up this year and next year. Okay, maybe it will, maybe it won't. We have a hefty surplus right now, but you just can't apply all of your surplus to a shortfall in revenues, because then what happens in following years, all of a sudden you don't have that buffer. And if you need it, then you have a significant tax increase. So we have to take reasonable measured steps. We need to look at the big picture. We need to look at all the things that are coming into play here. So if you look at residential properties, there is a push on residential properties, people moving out of New York City, Philadelphia, wherever, and buying properties. A statistic I was told recently, today, in fact, was that last year, about 4% of new home buyers in Princeton were from New York City. So far this year, that number is up to around 17%. So that tells us something. I think all of us have heard someone that we know say, yeah, I went to sell my house and all of a sudden I had 5-6 bids above asking price. So I mention all this just to say there's pressure to buy homes. It doesn't appear that the value of most homes is going down. So if the value isn't going down, it doesn't mean that, you know, there's a problem with taxes, more or less, because the values are holding, which is a good thing. Interestingly enough, the tax collection rate as of a month ago was actually ahead of where it was at the same time last year, which is surprising to me, but it's a good sign for the town, because that means that revenue hasn't been impacted yet. But tax revenue could be impacted next year as we look at commercial properties, is what happens if businesses start to fail, if landlords can't collect rent, they are going to appeal, could possibly appeal their assessments. And again, as I mentioned before, 17% of the rateable base is due to commercial properties. So all of this has to be considered. So there's so many things that go into everything. I guess the bottom line is, let's big picture, let's not focus too narrowly. Let's make sure we're taking everything into consideration that needs to be considered before we make decisions or move ahead in a certain direction.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to jump in now, and I want to ask about climate change and resilience. And we're fortunate you have deep experience in emergency management, which I think is going to, unfortunately, we're going to need as we've seen the rise in extreme weather and storms. And so can you talk a little bit about how we can build resilience in Princeton, and how prepared you think we are? And if you have any ideas for what more we can be doing?
Sure, thanks. That's a great, I love those kind of questions. But I was on the resiliency working group that was part of one of the many groups that helped with the current climate action plan. I was very happy to be able to help with that. But in this area, right, I mean, my background is I've been in the fire department, I've been in emergency medical services, for 40 some years. I actually was the then borough's first director of emergency services. So I do have a lot of experience and knowledge when it comes to emergency management, emergency services. I was the police commissioner in the former borough for 11 years. So I kind of get it with all of this. But climate action is something that, I think our party, the Democrats, have pretty much realized this is real, no matter what other people might say. And it's great that we're trying to do things that we can locally. And it's great that we support things on a county, state, and of course, national level when it comes to this. We've seen the intensity of storms has increased. The frequency of storms has increased. What are some of the things that we need to do? I think we should be talking to the Board of Public Utilities about a long-term plan to bury utility lines. The amount of time and money spent to repair these lines after every storm is ridiculous. The cost to businesses, the cost to people that have medical needs, that need oxygen or whatever in their homes, and their medical equipment won't function. This is a life-threatening situation to people, especially as the duration of storms become longer and the impact is more significant. So we need to continue to look at what steps can we take as far as flooding. The dinky line. Everybody talks about the dinky line, and they're always focused. Well, will it be a heavy rail, light rail? Will it be a bus? I don't care what it is, as long as that line that right of way stays there. To me, that right of way is an emergency egress and ingress into our town. If the roads are blocked, and we've had a couple storms where it's been virtually impossible to get in or out of Princeton. So there's a pathway. We need to get people to a hospital. We need water supplies. I don't know what we might need brought in there. For the most of the length of that right of way, it's elevated and you can get in and out of town. So again, big picture thinking. We have to really look at what are all the things that come into this, and anything and everything that we can do. There's people that are talking about a leaf blower ordinance. Okay, there's only a small number of towns in New Jersey that have leaf blower ordinances, but let's jump on the bandwagon. Let's be one more. Let's ban gas-powered leaf blowers for the majority of the year, as other towns have successfully done. Let's push battery-powered. I know I've converted it in my own yard. My lawnmower, my my edge trimmer, my hedge trimmer, my blower, they're all battery powered. It's great. They're a lot quieter. They're a lot better for the environment. So there's a lot we could do. We have Sustainable Princeton. I know our environmental commission is very active. So we have a lot of knowledge and expertise here in this town that's helping push us in the right direction. We need to embrace it and continue to grow those efforts.
Great. Now to a different crisis, the pandemic. You might be taking office right when we're at the height of a third wave, in the middle of the winter. We have some good things going for us. We have a state and a governor and a state Department of Health that recognize science and follow the rules. And we have a great health department, and our mayor has been doing a really good job keeping people informed. But it's still coming, this next wave. And what are your thoughts about what we can do to be prepared, and what's the role of the mayor? And especially since it looks like we won't have a vaccine until the spring at the earliest.
Right. So look, I think the role of the mayor has a number of roles. One is just being a visible leader. One is being a visible cheerleader. One is saying, here's what we need to do. One is leading by example. So, the use of a mask. As part of my campaign, I still have a number of Facebook Live sessions. And one of the very first ones was, okay, here's how you use a mask. Here's how you put it on. Here's when you should use it. Here's why you should use it. So, we need to keep paying attention to those precautions. And we need to keep stressing them with our residents and people who come to visit our town. The governor the other day said, as the second wave comes, and hopefully that's to be it, who knows, but we don't want to do statewide close everything. We need to be more surgical. So I think we need to be somewhat surgical too. Do we have a problem? What is the problem? Where is the problem? Do we continue to have a problem downtown with people not wearing masks, people coming from other parts of the state or wherever? So, we're going to have to react. We need to pay a lot of attention to exactly what's happening. And I think we're set up really well to do that. I mean, if you look at all that our health department, our health officer, our new director of emergency management, and before we hired our new director of emergency management, former police chief Nick Sutter acted as in the emergency management role for us. If you look at all that they accomplished under really hard odds, it's amazing. And so they've really put us in a good position. And if you also look at the communication the town set up, the communication on COVID-19, all the information they put out on such a regular basis, anyone that wants to spend just 10 seconds saying, I want to know what's going on, it's so easy to find out. So communication, leadership, lead by example, all things that we just need to, again, pay attention and react swiftly as we need to do things.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Mark, I'm going to switch topics a little bit here to talk about the university. They're planning 2 new big dormitories to add to their student enrollment, and so the footprint keeps expanding. And we have a new police chief. That's been an area sometimes where there's been some friction with the university. You obviously don't have ties to the university, so the kind of veil of conflict of interest will be lifted. Just curious how you see the relationship going with the university. And I want to mention, though, I really overlooked the fact that so many of us know that on a day-to-day basis, we interface with them easily with a lot. I know you do with PFARs, with the fire department, and we do have a very good relationship on the ground. But when you talk about big picture, I guess I would throw that in the bucket of how you see that long-term big picture.
Sure. So the university does so much good for the town. It's amazing. But there's still, I think there's so many people in town, they either love the university or they hate the university. So we need to work on that. The relationship with the university can't be based, at least the relationship between the elected officials and the university administration shouldn't be based solely on every 7 years, 5 years, whatever the term of a financial agreement is. Hey, let's talk about how much money the university should provide to the town. Obviously, the university has an obligation to provide financial support because of the services that we provide to the university. But I think, again, from the big picture point of view, we want more of a real partnership with the university and more of a partnership that talks about planning. and long-term planning. So I'm not a fan of, as I've seen happen sometimes, the university comes over with a plan for some development or more building projects and say, well, what do you think? Well, usually they're so far down the road, they've invested so much time and money into those plans, it really makes no sense to change them to any significant amount. So we're jumping into the process way late, and things that we could provide, suggest, that would be meaningful and helpful are lost. So the timing of that process needs to change. But I think the discussion needs to be also, the university announced they're going to do an incredible renovation of their art museum. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be amazing. But you have to wonder, wow, what if that was on Nassau Street? What if that was on Olden Avenue, where part of the engineering quad that's going to go away? There'd be space there. The Lake Campus project out on West Windsor, part of that is an innovation center, or I believe that's the terminology they use for it. Well, wait a minute. How come that's not in Princeton? But you're Princeton University. You're not West Windsor University. If you're going to build stuff that's going to draw people to the area, we want you to draw them to Princeton. And why should they seriously consider that? Well, as you hire faculty and staff, as you attract students, what do people look at? Do you have a downtown? Do you have a lot of good businesses? Do you have a good school system? Is it a community that's inviting? Is it an open community? Is it a community that provides other activities besides just being at the school? Well, yeah, we do all those things. So every day we help the university attract the people that they need. So the relationship is really, in my mind, already one of two equal partners. I think we just need to say to them, hey, come on, let's come to the table and let's act as equals. So a lot of the long-term planning that the university wants to do and that we, the town, need to do really complement each other. So we should be talking about those way early. There's lots of ways that we can support each other, I think, beyond what happens now. And that's in the interest of that institution, and it's in the interest of this community. So I'm big on trying to push that.
Good, thank you. I agree, by the way. I'm going to switch to PFARs a little bit. And just like we asked Paula to kind of clear up some confusion about her role versus the Board of Elections, I wonder if you'd like to take a minute and talk about PFARs, what their relationship is or isn't with the town, and how you will deal with that relationship vis-a-vis being mayor as we move along.
Sure. So this is another topic in one of my Facebook Live sessions. So I keep saying that. So people go to my website, look at all my Facebook Live sessions. There's been like 12 of them. But anyway, so Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, or PFARS, is a vital service in this community. PFARS started in 1939 as an all-volunteer organization. 7-8 years ago, it went to a combination of paid and volunteer. So right now there's 9 paid EMTs and about 100 volunteer EMTs. The relationship with the town helped support the first paid staff for the squad in 1980 and continued to provide some tax dollars to help with the paid staff at the squad until about 2005 or 2006. And then that stopped. So since then, there's been no direct financial tax dollars coming to the first aid squad. Now, the first aid squad's new building was built entirely by money that the squad went out and raised. The town did donate the land, which was huge. So that was a big help. So inherently, there's no direct conflict between my role as president of Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, my full-time paid job, and becoming the mayor of Princeton. However, if, should the town support the squad more? Yeah, I really think they should. And I'll tell you just a little bit about why. The type of organization that Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad used to be similar to many first aid organizations in towns around us. West Windsor no longer has a volunteer first aid squad. Lawrence Township no longer has a volunteer first aid squad. Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, as this combination of volunteer paid organization, has 4 ambulances. They have a rescue truck. They have a boat. They've got SUVs. They've got rescue capabilities. They've got all kinds of training. Now, if they go away, the town is going to have to provide that service. So that does become a tax burden. But also what's happened in other nearby towns that have lost their organization similar to Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad is it's been replaced by a municipal service or a third-party service that provides a single ambulance and a single crew. I know that we, Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, oftentimes handle mutual aid calls in other towns that no longer have the robust number of ambulances and people available that the model that Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad uses now. So without that organization here in town, that's a problem for us. That's a step backwards when it comes to emergency medical and rescue services. Having said all that, should the town help the squad more? Yes, they should. But if they do, obviously I would be conflicted, and I couldn't be at a meeting saying, oh, let me vote for whatever for the first aid squad. So I understand where the conflicts are, and I would definitely not be part of creating or letting that conflict happen.
Thank you. That's a beautiful new building, by the way.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Heather, do you have another question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, no, yeah, all right, then let me, Mark, you started to touch on this, and let me go a little bit deeper. One of your platforms, one of the tenets of your platform is you talk about transparency, and I think a lot of politicians talk about transparency. I'm wondering if you could talk a little more specifically about what that means to you and sort of the things that you'll do specifically to make your term more transparent.
Sure. So when I talk about transparency, unlike politicians, I actually mean that I want us, I want myself, and I want our government to be transparent. And one thing that I used to debate vigorously with people when I was on the borough council was, I'm not a politician, I'm an elected official. And I think there's a difference. To my mind, a politician is somebody that is not necessarily giving you the whole truth all the time, but could be speaking in half truths and is always trying to maneuver something and may have a hidden agenda that you don't know about. I have no hidden agendas. If you want to know what I think, all you have to do is ask me and I'll tell you. So when it comes to transparency, I firmly believe there is very little that the municipal government does that cannot and should not be discussed in a public meeting and should not be decided anywhere than in a public meeting. Granted, there's a few exceptions, but those are few. So we should be willing, able, eager to have whatever discussion we need to have in public. Some of those discussions will be difficult discussions. I get it. They might be uncomfortable, but these are all business discussions. They're not personal discussions. So people shouldn't get upset. People shouldn't say, oh, someone disagreed with me, that's terrible. No, that's okay. You want a robust discussion. You want to hear people's true viewpoints, true perspectives, true experience and knowledge on whatever it is you're talking about. And you need to take all of that into consideration. That's why you don't want to decide what you're going to do before a public meeting. If you've already decided before you get to the meeting, somebody pops up with something you've never heard of before, you're going to be less likely to actually listen to it because you've already made up your mind. So to me, the public meeting is where you make your decisions, you listen to people, you gather all that information together, and then you make your decision. And people want to be listened to, and people get it. We're not always going to agree, but if you listen to people, then they're going to be much more content with their government because they know you're doing your job. We can't agree with everybody. That's impossible. So we have to take the best information, make the best decisions we can at the moment when the decision is needed. So I think people are going to see when I talk about transparency, I'm dead serious about it.
All right, well, can I ask one more question that sort of tails on to that? People now want to know how to get involved in our government. And I know that when my little dabble in it, people asked, well, how do I do that? So how can people get involved in this government? There are boards, there are committees, there are commissions. How do they do that? And what's your plan for expanding that?
Right. So my viewpoint is that on all these different boards, committees, and commissions, what are typically the town calls BCCs, the BCCs should have full membership. There's a number of them that have vacant positions and have had vacant positions for a while. We should be making every effort to fill all those positions. And so, the question is, how do you do that? So if you're out there and you're watching this and you're interested, there's a couple ways. A, contact any elected official and say, hey, I want to be considered for one of these BCCs. The other thing is if you go to the town website, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little menu box. Click on the menu box. The very last thing in the drop-down is BCCs. Click on that. 2 little things pop up. One of them is, hey, I'm interested in being on a BCC. Click me, and that takes you to an application process. So to get involved, I think is fairly easy. The challenge, I think people should try to pay attention to what all these different groups are and which one might lend itself to your expertise, knowledge, or interest, and then try to focus on getting involved in that one. But if there's not an opening in that one, then my suggestion is anyone that we're able to get you on, jump on it, because you want to get involved, and no matter which PCC you join, it's going to be beneficial to you. It's going to be beneficial to us. The other thing is, if for some reason we get swamped and we have so many applications and we don't have enough vacancies, all these different groups at times, and even the council at times, needs to put together a task force, or here's some specific item or decision or topic that we need help on. So our residents should say, look, here's my expertise. If something comes up in this area, call me. I'm willing to help you. So I am happy to make sure that we make the effort, assuming I get elected in November. I know I'm unopposed, but I'm not elected yet. So until that day is, I'm not going to act like I'm elected. Thank you, though. But I'll make every effort, if elected, to make sure that we involve as many people as possible whenever we can.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mark, I did have one question that came in from the public, and that is about a civilian complaint review board for the police. Would you be in favor or support that, or where would you stand on a review board for the police?
Yeah, I think we need to pay attention to how to set that up. I thought that the Civil Rights Commission, I thought that was part of their mandate. So I need to check exactly. One thing is I want to check the mandate of all our different boards and commissions and just make sure that they're all functioning properly. But I wouldn't want to set something up that's duplicating something that's already there. Yeah, as long as we set up clear guidelines, at the end of the day, I mean, civilian oversight, actually the council is supposed to be the civilian oversight of the police department already. So I need to find out what is the council doing in that regard, and what is the Civil Rights Commission doing in that regard. But in the general topic, I don't see that as threatening. I just want to make sure I know enough before I give you a specific answer, because I'm not sure what the other 2 bodies are doing in that regard just yet.
I appreciate that. You may want to check who the appropriate authority is on the
Well, that's true
council.
too.
Yeah, it's because I don't think it's set up currently to be the council. But that does dovetail nicely with our last guest, last but not least. I want to welcome our 2 council candidates who are incumbents and also running unopposed, David Cohen and President David Cohen of the council, and Laticia Fraga. And I've asked them both if they'd like to take a few minutes and talk about what their priorities are for the upcoming term. And Laticia, I think if I start with you, maybe you can speak to the Civil Rights Commission issue and whether or not they're talking about a civilian review board for the police. Would that be an overlap? And you'll need to unmute yourself. You'll need to, yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, PCDO, for organizing this. And I know I had a little bit of a challenge logging in at first, but thank you to Heather for pointing me in the right direction. I'd still be sitting in a waiting room if not for Heather. So as far as the Civil Rights Commission, they have been discussing that. In fact, they have already had one community meeting where they invited Chief Sutter to discuss his views. And they planned a second one with our new chief, Chief Morgan, to continue that discussion. There have not been any recommendations made. I feel that in general, the Civil Rights Commission feels that the open communication that exists is a good one. And so it's just a matter of us working together. Anything that we do in the community, I feel that we can accomplish more when we when we work together, whether it's including for me personally, working with my colleagues on council, working with stakeholders, and working with our community partners. So in the area of civilian overview, we understood that the state might be actually considering some recommendations on that. So the CRC understands that, and we're waiting to see what, if anything, is going to come down from the state level. Now, as far as my goals, what I would like to share is that, needless to say, I'm going to continue working with my colleagues on working together on all that comes before council. But for myself personally, I'm going to continue focusing on quality of life issues. That's access to healthcare. And as we go along, so I'll mention that as a goal, but also want to mention what we're already doing on that. We're very excited and looking forward to Capitol Health opening up at the beginning of 2021. They're going to be opening up a medical center where they've already indicated that they're going to provide health services to both uninsured and underinsured, but basically everyone. They didn't want to call themselves a clinic because they want to be seen as a medical center for everyone. So we're looking forward to that, but obviously we want to keep working together with the Human Services and Health Department to, especially once a vaccine becomes available, to ensure that we have the clinics and make it available to everyone in our community. Another area that we need to focus on that was very evident during the pandemic, that even though our community partners were great in coming together and organizing and providing, whether it was food pantries, Meals on Wheels, anything that was needed in our community. There were just groups that organized and community members, community leaders that came together to provide those services, but not everybody that needed them was aware of it. So we need to work on ensuring that whatever resources are available, everybody is aware of that. And on that note, I'm very excited and looking forward to Human Services finally getting the assistance that has been sorely needed. They definitely, Mayor Lempert mentioned at the last council meeting, there was a time when there was talk of defunding or the Human Services Department, but I'm very happy to see that now we're actually finally adding another staff person, and in this instance, it's going to be an outreach coordinator that's going to be working with the Human Services Director. We also need to continue working with our community partners and the police department on community building and on building trust. That was also something that was evident that discussion was needed during the Black Lives Matter movement. But already, our community has been very progressive. I've had the opportunity to interview, have a long discussion with Chris Morgan, our new chief of police. And so I'm very optimistic and looking forward at what we'll be able to continue building together. And not to mention building our community, revitalizing our central business district, and also our residents who have been hit hard by the pandemic, economically hit by the pandemic. Many of us, my household included, that we're very fortunate that we have the option to work from home. So the pandemic has been an inconvenience, but it really, and that's basically, yes, we miss the face-to-face connections. And yes, it's been hard mostly on the kids, but it's been more of an inconvenience. But for many in our community, from our businesses to our residents who don't have that luxury and that option of working from home, they've really been hit hard. I know the state has issued a moratorium on evictions, which is good. And we're working with our human services and other community partners and getting the word out that individuals cannot be evicted during this moratorium. But eventually the rent's going to come due. So already we've mobilized and working with our community partners on that, the funds that may be available to help our residents who are going to need some economic assistance in that. I know, and I just wanted to also mention, it came up before about what we were prepared to do on council with the budget cuts and some of the challenges. And in the area of vacancies, I sit on the personnel committee. And so I'm happy to report that already whenever there is a vacancy, we do evaluate whether and decide whether that position needs to be filled or whether duties need to be combined with another department. And I would use as an example, the clerk's office and Access Princeton. That's an area where we're already doing that. And as far as, yes, we're very sad to see the businesses that are closing, but also there, I'm happy to report that there are new businesses coming in. And I wanted to use as an example, there's a vegan restaurant that's going to be opening up where the Spy Shop used to be. And also Madewell is going to be going into where Talbot used to be. So I'm everybody who knows me knows that I'm an optimist. So when there's challenges, we'll get through them, and we'll get through them together. And it's not just making policy, but also working with our many community partners and stakeholders to get through this.
Thank you so much, Laticia. Madewell's open. I was in there this weekend.
Yeah.
David, last but not least, Council President, I'm going to send it to you to wrap up with your priorities for the next term.
Thank you, Joe. And I guess I want to also thank the PCDO for hosting this event tonight and everyone who worked on helping to put it together. Mark did get a chance to talk some about the climate action plan. And I have been telling the voters during the campaign this year that this is really an area where I want to focus my energies in the coming year and in the coming term. Specifically, there are a couple of things that I've been working on this year. I've been very involved with the affordable housing program. And one of the things that we're working hard on is to actually raise the level of sustainability for the design of these projects as much as possible. And we're quite optimistic for the project that's going to be happening on the Franklin lot, that we're going to be able to do something that's well above code for energy efficiency. But I think that PCH, Princeton Community Housing, has also been reaching out and talking about doing something that's above code for their new project. And there are some other opportunities as well. And I think it's just a no-brainer because there's some additional investment up front, but over the life of a project, you save so much in energy costs. Typically, it's about a 10-year payback to do something like passive house or net zero construction. And then, these projects are owned and operated by the developer for at least 30 years. So after 10 years, all the savings on utilities are free and clear and potential profit to the developer. So that's one area. And by the way, the same logic applies to municipal facilities. So to the extent that we're going to be doing any construction, and I know that at one of our most recent council meetings, we talked about authorizing the architectural design for a new facility for Public Works to go in to replace the trailer at the John Street Public Works yard. And I think that that's an area that I'm really going to be focused on, is trying to make sure that that facility as well is built to the highest standard we can, because it's going to pay back in the long term multiple times to the bottom line for the municipality. But beyond the carbon performance of our buildings, the resiliency is really important as well. And Mark talked a little bit about that, but one of the focuses for me this year, we revived a committee that had been moribund for a number of years, the Flood and Stormwater Committee, which you could find on the website before this year, but there were no members and there were no meetings. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Eve Niedergang, who really was the one who got this going. But then, unfortunately, the attorneys told her she had to step down because she's actually working for the Watershed Institute, and they perceived that as a conflict. So I was already participating with the committee and took over as the council liaison. Committee's doing amazing work, updating our stormwater ordinances, which was required by the state. The state actually came out with some new green infrastructure requirements this year. So we've been combining that with our existing ordinance, because our existing ordinance actually goes above and beyond what's required by the state ordinances. We require stormwater management for smaller projects than are required under state law. So there was a real meshing of the new state ordinance with our local one. Above and beyond that, though, we're interested in adopting a redevelopment stormwater ordinance, which essentially would allow us to require stormwater improvements if an existing property is redeveloped. Currently, under the rules, if you're not adding impervious coverage, even if you're tearing down, the entire existing structure and putting a new one, if you don't add impervious coverage, you're not required to do any stormwater management. But a lot of these older properties have no stormwater management at all. And the way that we have to deal with these increases in the frequency of the severe rain events that Mark was referring to, we can't just even hold steady. We can't just leave things the way they are and make sure that new projects are well designed. We actually have to do remedial work to make sure that all of our existing infrastructure is well managed. Because with the increases in the amount of rainwater, we're going to have more and more flooding. And, many of the complaints that we get from residents right now have to do with how, somebody put an addition on a house next to mine and now my basement floods. Well, I got news for you. I mean, sometimes it has something to do with your neighbor, but more often it just has to do with climate change. And we're all seeing more flooding in our houses, even if a neighbor didn't do anything next to us. So that's a big area. And the other thing on stormwater is we're looking into putting in a stormwater utility, which is basically a mechanism for charging property owners on the basis of how much stormwater flows off of their property, instead of just charging them on the size of their property. Right now, the way that stormwater is paid for in town is just out of general tax revenue. So a property owner who has, an acre and their stormwater is fully managed because they developed it 5 years ago under fairly modern standards, they're paying exactly the same taxes towards stormwater management as somebody who has a property that's not managed at all, and that's putting gallons and gallons, tens and thousands of gallons of water into our stormwater system. So stormwater utility allows you to more fairly allocate the costs associated with managing stormwater to the different property owners based on how much stormwater they're generating. I don't want to go too long, but the other thing that Mark also mentioned is the updating and revisioning of our master plan. And that's a big initiative that the planning office is committed to undertaking this coming year. And I really expect to be working on that very, very actively with the planning department. You know, this year we adopted a new green building and environmental sustainability element into the master plan, but it's this sort of standalone element that, you know, tells property owners and developers in town how to develop in a more sustainable way. But what we need to do is we need to work in those principles of sustainability into all the other elements of the master plan. So the circulation element and the housing element and the utility element all have components that can be much more sustainable. And so that's one of the goals in redoing the master plan. It's only one of them because our master plan is old. It's based on, you know, a town, I think it was created in 1987. So it's, you know, it's almost 35 years old, and the town has changed so much since then. And principles of smart growth have been, you know, have evolved in the nation and in the world for how you want to see communities grow. And we want to make sure that those smart growth principles are really informing and inspiring every aspect of the master plan. So that's what I'm focused on.
David, thank you. I'm tempted to kind of geek out and ask you about how you can create, sort of demand a higher level of environmental sustainability on affordable housing without it being cost additive, which is illegal to require.
Right.
But maybe we can talk about that a lot. We'll try.
I would like to just say a word about it, because what you have to realize is that these developers do develop and then own and operate.
Right.
So as I was saying, it's actually, this is a profit center for them. If they develop in a truly energy efficient way, they save so much on their utilities, and they are charging the residents of the affordable housing both rent and a utility allowance. So if the utility allowance can be reduced, the rent can go up, because the two are taken together. As you know, this is how you calculate rent, is a percentage of the resident's income that has to include both utilities and rent. So really what you have to do is work with these developers and get them to understand that it's actually going to be more profit for them, more income for them if they spend a little more upfront. They don't have to do it. You're right. We can't require them to do it, but they're crazy if they don't do it. So it's just communicating that.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone, my great assistants, Heather Howard and Dina Shaw, and I want to thank our clerk, Paula Sollami Cavallo, and don't forget to cast a vote for her, and also our new mayor-to-be, Mark Freda, Laticia Fraga, and Council President David Cohen. Thank you so much. You know, we've got 16 days to go until the election, and I hope everyone will commit to doing something every single day between now and then to make sure that we see the blue wave that we would all like to see. I want to mention that we're doing phone banking for the PCDO, through the PCDO, on Tuesdays and Saturdays into Ohio and Pennsylvania. You can go to our website or contact me if you're interested. The county has opportunities as well if those times don't work for you, but PrincetonDems.org or MercerDemocrats.com if you are interested in doing some additional volunteering. So thank you all very much and have a great evening. Thank you.